There was never a clock in this room until today. There was never a clock in this room. For 100 years, this study and the people inside lived completely outside the grip of time. They didn't age, they didn't wither. They just were. It was an endless literary afternoon, bathed in the amber glow of a sun that never set. Here, scholars and dreamers existed in a state of perfect preservation, their debates as fresh as the day they began, their chess games paused for a decade between moves. The very air was thick with stillness, the dust motes just hanging in the golden light, refusing to settle. It was a haven, a sanctuary carved right out of eternity. Until today. Section 1, The Anomaly. Elias was the first to see it. He'd been in the study for what the outside world would measure as 97 years, but for him, it was just a single, unbroken thought. His life's work, a grand unified theory of narrative, was spread across a vast oak desk, not one page yellowed by age. He looked up from a particularly stubborn paradox, his gaze drifting to the west wall, a space that had held nothing but shadowed mahogany for as long as anyone could remember. But now, it was occupied. It was a grandfather clock, impossibly tall, carved from a wood so dark it seemed to drink the light, like polished ebony. It was a monstrous, beautiful thing. Its face was a disk of pale, unblemished porcelain, its hands two slender blades of black steel, both pointed straight up at the 12. A great brass pendulum hung motionless inside its glass tomb. It didn't tick, and somehow, its silence was heavier, more profound than the century of quiet that had come before it. Ilara found him there, just staring. She, who had come to the study to escape a world obsessed with frantic progress, felt a cold dread bloom in her chest. Elias, where did that come from? He didn't turn. His voice was a dry whisper, a sound unused to shock. It wasn't here a moment ago. They circled it like a predator, a foreign object in their pristine ecosystem. It had no dust on its shoulders, no scuffs on its base. It was an intrusion, a violation of the one fundamental rule of their existence. Here, time did not apply. The others gathered, their ageless faces a mix of confusion and a new, unfamiliar emotion. Fear. For an hour, they just watched it, waiting. The sunbeam in the air didn't move. The dust didn't fall. The clock remained silent, a dead thing. A cautious relief started to settle over them. Maybe it was just an object, a strange sculpture that had somehow appeared. Maybe their sanctuary was still safe. And then, with a sound that shattered the stillness like a stone through glass, the clock chimed 1. Section 2. The Countdown. That chime wasn't just a sound. It was a physical force, a deep, brazen clang that vibrated through the floorboards and into their bones. The moment it struck, Ilara cried out, clutching her face. Elias spun toward her. There, at the corner of her eye, was a faint, spiderweb-thin line that hadn't been there before. He felt a strange prickling on his own scalp. Reaching up, his fingers found a single, coarse hair among the silkiness. It was wiry, brittle. Panic, a long-forgotten instinct, seized the room. The occupants, a dozen in total, fell into chaos. One of them, a philosopher named Marcus, felt a sudden ache in his knee, a ghost of an injury from his boyhood, forgotten for 80 years. The rules of their world weren't just broken. They were being violently rewritten. The clock wasn't just marking time. It was imposing it. Each chime, they slowly realized, was a sentence. An hour later, the clock chimed again. 2 o'clock. The lines around Ilara's eyes deepened. Two more of Elias's hairs turned gray. A poet named Sophia watched in horror as a brown spot appeared on the back of her hand. A liver spot, a mark of decay. She began to weep, the first tears the study had seen in a lifetime. Ilara, always the defiant one, grabbed a heavy iron fire poker. "No," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "I will not be erased by this thing." She swung at the clock's glass case, the poker aimed right at the serene, mocking face. The poker hit the glass and stopped dead, not with a shatter, but with a dull, soundless thud, like hitting a wall of solid force. The vibration shot up her arms and threw her backward onto the floor. The clock was untouched, unknowable, unstoppable. The third chime came, and with it, a collective groan of despair. Joints ached, skin sagged. Their once vibrant minds, which held a century of uninterrupted thought, started to feel the fog of age creep in. Elias, ever the scholar, tried to reason with it. He pored over his books, searching for any myth that spoke of such a thing. He found Gothic tales of clocks that symbolized mortality, a specter of death invading a place of denial. But there was no solution, no counterspell. The knowledge only made his terror worse. By the fifth chime, their eternal afternoon had faded. The sunbeam had crept across the floor and was now a weak orange slant. Real dust began to settle on every surface. The books on their shelves started to look tired, their pages yellowing at the edges. The study itself was aging right along with them. They tried everything. They tried muffling the clock with priceless tapestries and books, but the chimes rang out, clear and undiminished. They tried to leave, but the door, always unlocked, was now sealed shut. They were trapped in their decaying paradise. The eighth chime. They were old now, truly old. Their backs were stooped, their hands gnarled and trembling. Marcus the philosopher sat in a corner staring into space, his mind a ruin of forgotten arguments. Sophia could no longer hold a pen. Ilara sat on the floor, her defiance burned away into a hollow resignation. She looked at Elias, his face a roadmap of wrinkles, his hair a shock of white. "Do you remember?" she asked, her voice a fragile crackle. "Why we came here? I think I'm starting to forget." The 10th chime. Only 3 of them were still conscious. The others had simply faded, slipped into a final silent sleep in their chairs. Their bodies became frail, then translucent, and then just dust. The 11th chime. Only Elias and Ilara remained. They sat on the floor, holding hands, leaning against the ancient oak desk. They were ancient, their skin like parchment, their breath shallow. They looked at the clock, its hands creeping toward the 12. They had lived for what felt like an eternity and were now being granted only a few more minutes. The irony was a cruel, final joke. "It's beautiful in a terrible way," Elias whispered, his eyes on the relentless pendulum. "To experience an entire lifetime in a single day." Ilara didn't answer. Her grip on his hand loosened. He looked at her and saw only a peaceful, tired old woman, her eyes closed, her last breath a silent sigh that stirred the dust on the floor. Elias was alone. He watched the minute hand click onto the 11. 1 hour left. He didn't spend it in fear. He spent it remembering. The vibrant debates, the silent companionship, the perfect golden stillness. He mourned its loss, and in doing so, he finally understood its value. The clock began to whir, gathering its strength for the final midnight strike. Section 3. The final moment. The final chime was different. It didn't clang. It resonated, a deep, profound tone that marked the end of an era. The sound hung in the air, washing over the ancient room. Elias, impossibly old, pushed himself to his feet. His bones screamed, but he forced himself to stand for one last act of will. He walked toward the clock, shuffling, each step a monumental effort. He wasn't angry anymore. The fear had been burned out hours ago, replaced by a strange, quiet curiosity. He'd spent his first life studying stories, and now he was at the end of the most bizarre one imaginable. He wanted to see the final page. He stood before the ebony monolith, its face impassive, its pendulum now still. A silence more complete than any he had ever known fell over the room. He reached out a trembling, skeletal hand, not to strike the clock, but to touch it. To feel the thing that had given him back his mortality. His fingertips, thin as paper, brushed against the cold glass. The moment he made contact, a fine latticework of cracks spread across his skin. He looked down as his hand just crumbled, not into flesh and blood, but into a stream of fine, gray dust. The decay spread rapidly up his arm, a painless, silent dissolution. He felt no horror, only a sense of completion. He looked at his reflection in the clock's face, the face of a man who had lived for 2 centuries in one day, and he smiled. Then, he was gone. Nothing remained but a pile of dust on the floor, indistinguishable from the rest. The study was empty, silent, dead. Conclusion. For a moment, there was only stillness. The grandfather clock stood sentinel over a room of dust and echoes. Then, a soft click. Slowly, impossibly, the clock's hands began to move, not forward, backward. The minute hand spun counterclockwise, faster and faster, a blur of black steel. The dust on the floor stirred, swirling upwards, coalescing. The piles reformed into bodies. The bodies grew younger. The wrinkles vanished. The gray hair receded. The decaying books plumped up, their pages whitening. The setting sun retreated from the floor, becoming a bright, midday beam suspended once more in the very center of the air. In a final, silent flash, the room was as it had been. The chess game was reset to its mid-move pause. The dozen scholars sat in their chairs, ageless and unaware, lost in thought. Elias looked up from his papers, a paradox momentarily forgotten, and blinked. The grandfather clock was gone. The west wall was nothing but shadowed mahogany. At that exact moment, the main door to the study opened with a soft creak. A young woman stood on the threshold, her eyes wide with wonder. She took a hesitant step inside, a hopeful, brilliant scholar ready to trade the chaotic world for a place of eternal peace. She smiled, unaware that she wasn't a visitor, but a replacement. She had all the time in the world. At least until the day a clock appeared for her, too. If you enjoy stories that explore the strange and the unknown, subscribe for more. What do you think the clock really is? Let me know in the comments below.